Hi, thank you for clicking on this video, and today what I'm going to share is how you are going to translate design into code. So I have with me here a Neumorphic Timer, and this is the design and this is how it looks like in the app. And this app is actually quite functional, meaning that it works. If I click on this button, it ticks. Alright. And if I stop it and I reset it, it resets. And if I play and I reset it, it just resets. Actually, these are the two designs that we are going to go through. And this is part 1 of 3 parts of this timer series. There is the layout and buttons, timer with provider, and circular timer bar. Today I'm going to share layout and buttons. Now, how can you plan your layouts with any design and how I create those neumorphic buttons? Alright, before I code, I plan. I don't know how people code, but for me, I usually just dive into the coding. Do you guys have the same workflow? Raise up your hand if you have. It's okay if you're in the office or at your room, just raise up your hand. An example is that your designer will hand you off the UI or the design of the app, something like this, and you're expected to code out the design, and you'll be like, okay, alright. So I would say that this is a fairly simple design, but first we're just designing one screen, which is this. This is the layout that I see when I plan. And here I create code that are actually low fidelity mockups. So what is low fidelity mockups? Some of you might know this, some of you might not. So low fidelity mockups are quick and easy. They have a very fast iteration process and they only comprise of basic shapes and design. So why do a mockup first in code? I will say it's because of visualization. When you're able to see how each components interact, it is actually helpful. Not all designs are able to be replicated to code. Then you can go back to the designer and might have some compromisation if you were to do a low fidelity mockup kind of code. And then you can ask further questions on what the designer is thinking about and such. So this is the layout that I usually draw when I have a design. And I'll code out something like this with very simple shapes and sizes of the design. Normally what I will do is I have the design and my VS Code and my app side by side. It is because it is efficient enough for me to go through the design. Usually I have like a Adobe XD or InVision app to reference on the different dimensions and space and fonts and sizes. However, I'm only limited to a screenshot. That's why I'm putting it side by side. So it's easy for me to reference and see how accurate I am to the design. Now, the first thing that we need to do is to get the background to be as the same size as the design. So you can use any color picker and get the color. So I got this color here. And next, we are going to have this padding. This padding is called safe area. And this is what iPhone shows. And what I found out is that rather than using the safe area widget, I will use a sized box and with a height from a media query class, getting from the context, and it has this view padding, which is basically the notch itself. And I will choose the top one. And this will give me the area that I need to work with when I'm working with a design. And then I decided that I need a size box with a height of 20 for it to have the spacing between the notch and at the same time my widgets. And now you can see here that all of these are just my low fidelity mockups and design. And it's very simple. You have your text, and then you have your button, you have your digital analog timer, and then you have this pie chart-ish kind of progress bar, and then you have your reset button. This is what I mean by low fidelity. And these are the code that you have to type out. It's a stretch, but it's very simple. It just contains sized box and containers, and that's about it. And because it's a fairly simple design, I think that there isn't any questions that I need to ask from my designer, right? Because there are certain designs that you have to have a very complicated kind of thing, but now it feels like easy to work with. So I will move on to the next part of a more complicated fidelity design, which is called high fidelity mockups. So currently we already have coded out our low fidelity mockups. Now we are going to create our high fidelity features. So high fidelity mockups are deliberate, they are slow in iteration and highly customized shapes and design. Out of this feature, which feature would you choose to create first? I would say there is two types and it's easy or hard. So which one are you going to choose? The easy feature or the hard feature? My answer is it might not be the answer that you might be looking for, but it depends actually. If you don't have a say in what to focus on what features to focus on, it depends on what the business needs are usually. Some features have a higher priority than others, and the highest priority might be the hardest problems to solve. However, in my opinion, if you read this book called Algorithms to Live By, The Computer Science of Human Decisions, but there is this concept where is it better to have one undone hard task or than two completed easy tasks in a week? So think about it, which actually takes more time to be done. In terms of doneness, I would say the two completed easy tasks you have achieved would actually increase the percentage of your overall to-dos. If you have one undone hard task that you focus on in that whole week, then you haven't really done much. Therefore, my conclusion, if I were to choose an easy or hard feature, if it doesn't have any priority, I would say the easy ones. This is also another thing that people might overlook. We are humans and we are emotional beings. You will feel good once you have done any task, and the easiest task to finish is an easy feature. You will feel that you are progressing. And if you are stuck on a problem, right, usually a hard feature or hard problem, then I would recommend you to find an easy problem to solve, then go back to the hard problem, because this will not make you feel that you are in a rut. You feel like you're stuck when you're facing a difficult problem. So today we are going to focus on the easy ones. This is because you will feel energized to accomplish this challenge. Therefore, there are 3 widgets we are going to go through. Can you guess it? Yes, correct. I don't know what your answer is, but I assume that you were saying the text widget, the button widget, the hamburger button widget in the black box, and the reset button. The other 2 in the orange boxes are pretty doable, but it is a little harder than the simple features that we're going to do today. One thing to take note is that if you were to see the design, there's actually a uniform padding at both the 2 horizontally, both on the left and right hand side. That's why the design is actually pretty uniform and is pleasing to the eye. So let's find out how to create those widgets. If you realize in the design, all of the widgets are inside a column. So you have 1, 2, 3 and 4 widgets all stacked in a column. But before that, we have to add the padding. So how are we going to add the padding is we have to add or wrap around the column in a padding that is symmetrical horizontally. So I've realized it's 35. And how I know that's 35, it's basically just comparing the design to your own app to see whether it fits as close as what you think it is. And now, next thing to note is that there's actually one refactor that you can do with these 2 widgets. So I have 2 sized boxes. One is for the safe area and the other one is for the space in between the safe area and the first row widgets. Do you know what's the refactoring? Let me give you 3 seconds. Correct. What you need to do is just you need to add 20. And if you save it, yep, it doesn't change. Next, we have a row of the text and a button. As you can see here, I did something that you guys might have not seen before, and is to include a spacer. So what a spacer does is that it creates a flexible space to insert, and that means it just balloon up. So before I add in a spacer, it will look something like this. Then once I add a spacer, it will just take as much space as possible until it reaches a limit. And that's why the design, I think, is pretty simple. One thing to note is that there is this package called Google Fonts, and I don't know what the font of this design. So I went to Google Fonts. So I went to all of the different fonts and try out the word timer. And I found out that Roboto has the closest to the design as we intended. So we see here, and if we see here, it's a bit thick. So maybe black 700. Yep, so both 700 is as close to the design as we want it to be. If we were to zoom in, So it is very close. That's why I didn't choose Roboto actually. I chose another design which is called DM Sense. So I put in the word timer and it actually renders at all of the different fonts that you want. And at the same time you want it to be bold, 700, and let's make it bigger. Yeah, so DM Sense is very close to what we intend to. And the thing is, usually before we have the fonts, right, what we need to do is we need to download it. So if we go to add, it's a laborious process where you have to download the file and add it into our Flutter project. But the Flutter team, amazing team, created a Google font library which helps in that process and reduce a lot of time in downloading the font file and putting in the assets folder and then updating our pub spec YAML, and then after that we have to put in the different font weights and other styles that we think we need. The Flutter team have created everything for us under this library, Google Fonts. Currently it's in beta and it's only available for iOS and Android. Sadly, web it is not available, but it's okay because it is fantastic. Such a good library that solves a very good pain point. Alright, so next, getting back to the design. If you see here carefully, if you click on this button, right, it actually goes down. Sorry if it's laggy. And if I click on the reset button, it goes down. So there's this slight animation that we need to implement in our buttons. In the actual app, our buttons is actually interactive. So an example is that our hamburger button, when I press it down, the shadows actually diminish. Same goes to the reset button. It gives this optical illusion of this button being pushed down to the app background, and it is just a simple shadow from maybe a value to the number 0. So I think it's really such a really good animation. And how we are going to do that? Luckily we have a Medium article that helps us in implementing this neumorphic design. So a neumorphic design is basically where half of your widget diagonally is reflecting a white shadow and the other half is reflecting a dark shadow. So this gives an illusion that the button is not floating. There's this article where Ivan Sherab, sorry if I mispronounce your name, he has this article called Neumorphic Designs with Flutter, and he explained and shows very well on the different types of neumorphism that's being created using Flutter. And we are going to make use of his code GIST. I will share you guys the link on this Medium article in the description below. He actually created a neumorphic library called Neumorphic, if I'm not wrong. I will link his library in the description below, and we are going to use the neumorphic container. I will not use a library because I probably have to override certain parameters or states that they have created. That's why I feel that having my own modified version of a code is better. So one thing to note is that this neumorphic container use animated container, and this animated container is such a helpful container if you want to do animations using container. I'm a fan of containers because they have the necessary parameters that I usually need to create designs. That's why using animated container, there is not much of a change except the duration of it, and that's about it. And you can copy most of it. So what I normally do is the box shader is the one that helps in the effect of being pushed. So I will show you on how I create the reset button first. Why the reset button? It's because if you see in the hamburger design, right, the hamburger is not an icon, but I've created 3 containers that are neumorphic, or I would say they are dug into the button itself. However, the reset button is very simple. It is just a curved container with the word reset. So I'm going to share on how you guys are going to create the reset button. So what I do is I will extract this widget. How you do that is you can press Command dot and then you see this window called extract widget, and I will type in reset button. Okay, so by having all of these containers, actually it gives a better workflow. In my opinion, you are able to extract a widget. You can just work around there. What we need to do next is we need to convert the stateless widget into a stateful, because the animation requires us to listen to a state. And this is because if we have on press, and then it will change the state into pressed, and it will animate the shadow from looking like it is not pressed, and when you push it down the shadow disappears and it gives the illusion that it has been pressed. So let's do it. So we have converted our stateless to stateful. Let's save it. It has an error, so we just need to restart. Alright, so what's next is we are going to copy and paste some of the Neumorphic container code from Ivan. So we copy this whole code. Okay, so now we have all of this. We just need to delete some of the errors. So they are missing these two variables called bevel and blur offset. So bevel is set to default as 10, and blur offset is set to the default of an offset class with the bevel divided by 2, which is 5 and 5. So x and y axis are 5. Therefore, we need to create these variables. So what I've done is I actually center the text, so it actually expands to this whole widget. If I press it down, so it looks like it's being pushed down. However, from the design, it doesn't look like exactly the color and the text height according to the design. So what I have changed is that the reset button now use the ampersand, and the color is according to what I have picked out using a color picker, and at the same time the offset is even lower now, so I can see the actual shadow of it using the color that I've picked, and I'm using white now. Alright, so one thing to take note if you guys are curious is that there's this thing called listener. Instead of using gesture picker, Ivan used listener. It's because that he says that it's faster. It is really up to your own choice. You can use either or, but it works the same. So you have a pointer down event and a pointer up event. So when you press down, then it has this boolean that you set state as true, so your shadow disappears when you press it, or it looks like it's going to disappear. Then when you release it, it becomes is pressed false, then you will have your shadow back again. So it's the same thing as on tap, if I'm not wrong, on tap down or something like that in gesture detector. Alright, so now we have done with the reset button. I'm going to share with you on how I created this Neumorphic hamburger button manually. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extract this small circle as its own widget. Why is it called hamburger button? Because a hamburger has 2 slices and 1 meat in the middle. Or you can call it a sandwich button, doesn't really matter. Alright, we got a hamburger button. I'm hungry. And we are going to do something very similar. We are going to use the Neumorphic container that we have copied and pasted and insert it inside. Okay, so I'm going to share with you on how I create the actual hamburger. So first it is a column, and what I did was to just stack 3 containers on top of one another. And I know that inside this container it looks very small, and the box decoration has only a body radius of 1. Okay, because if it's too circular, it doesn't look like what we are going to implement. And next up, we are going to use the box shadow. So what I've realized so far is that you just need a very small amount of shadow inside and another box shadow, or I would say the background of it, to be white, so it looks like it is inside or in depth of this button. And all of these are compressed, so the main axis size here use a minimum space. Is because that I want my widgets to not use a lot of space. It minimizes the amount of free space along the main axis, and it subjects to the incoming layout constraint. That's why I rather have it to be very small. Now we wrap it up inside a Neumorphic container. So it's roughly around the same thing from what we have copied and pasted. And what is different is that my shape now is a circle. we don't have anything to shape its size except for the padding. So the padding we have is 16. So we use a default padding that we have. And the rest is relatively the same as what we have done to the reset button. So our shadows, our box shadows and blur radius are the same as what we have done here. Thank you for listening. If you think this is helpful, like this video and subscribe for more videos of the timer app. So the next part is that I'm going to show on how to create this ticking timer using provider. So I'll catch you on the next video.